How to run a campaign for judge? If you would like to know the answer to that question, you're in the right place. Stay with me because I got a lot of really juicy stuff to share with you so that you can win an election when you do. We're going to talk about the rules that affect you, and we're going to start with that because those rules are very important. The restrictions that you're under as a judicial candidate, how you get on the ballot, and then we're going to do a deep dive into how you put a political campaign together. And along the way, I'm going to talk about how some judicial candidates did that extraordinarily well. So stay with me. The first step is two kinds of rules that you have to look at. The restrictions on judicial candidates are a little bit different than they are for candidates, say, running for the Congress or the legislature or the Senate. And sometimes the rules require that you not say certain things during the course of a campaign. In many jurisdictions, you're not allowed to say how you would rule on a particular case pending before the court. You're not allowed to say that you despise one side that may be on one side of the lawsuit and you will always rule against them. There are, frankly, just restrictions on your freedom of speech because it's considered bad karma for judicial candidates to advertise how they would rule on cases when in fact judges are supposed to rule on the basis of law. So that's why that restriction is in place for many judicial candidates. To know what those restrictions are in your race, you have to consult the rules to see what you're allowed to say. There are also some judicial races that are nonpartisan, some are partisan. These are rules that you need to consult before you start the campaign so that you're fully aware of what they are. The second set of rules to take a look at is what is required for you to get on the ballot. This varies by jurisdiction. Some judges are nominated by party committees and that automatically places them on the ballot. Some judges must run in primary elections, and that involves putting together a political campaign. Some judicial candidates are required to file complicated financial disclosure rules so the public knows if they may have a conflict of interest once they sit on the bench. There are rules governing how you raise money, how much you are allowed to collect, and what you are sometimes allowed to spend that on. Here's the point of mentioning these rules. If you violate any of them, you either get thrown off the ballot or disqualified as a judicial candidate. And judicial ethics commissions in jurisdictions tend to take that responsibility very seriously. I have seen it happen. So don't let your ignorance of the rules be your excuse for being thrown off the ballot or disqualified as a candidate. Where do you go to find this stuff? Go to the state or jurisdictional website where you are running. Try and find the rules there. If you can't find them there, go talk to people who've sought the office before because they've been through it and they probably have a pretty good idea of the rules. If all else fails, go to ChatGPT and start asking it questions. Now, you need to validate whatever answer you find because ChatGPT is not perfect, but they will cite sources, and that gives you an idea of where to go to find what the rules really are. Now, once you know what the rules are, it's time to plot the campaign. And that starts with the people that you are going to target and the message you're going to disseminate to them and how you are going to do this. This is just fundamental politics 101. Every good campaign starts with an examination of the data. What is the partisan affiliation of the people in your jurisdiction? What is their voting history? What are past turnout patterns in races like yours? How many people do you expect to vote? Where do they live inside your jurisdiction? Are they populated in urban or suburban or rural parts of your jurisdiction? How many voters are in each? Do these voters own their home or do they rent? What is their race, their ethnicity, their age, their income level? What is the value of their home? All of this is available to you if you're willing to look at the right kind of data. Now, if you have no idea where to find that, leave a comment in the comment section and I will tell you where to get it. That's the first part of your campaign. Once you've done that, you need to figure out your message. This is where it gets dicey because you are under different restrictions most of the time in what you are allowed to say compared to, say, candidates for Congress or the U.S. Senate. In other words, you can't go out there and say, I'm going to rule this way on this and rule this way on this and rule this way on this. You're not allowed to do that in judicial races. So judicial races take that element of your message off the table, which leaves you only 4 other things you kind of talk about in your message. Number 1, talk about what makes you qualified to do the job. Are you better qualified than your opponent? Have you belonged to more associations? Have you won awards for your jurisprudence as an attorney? Have you tried famous cases? Have you brought justice to people because of cases you've tried? What kind of legal work have you done? What is your specialty in the legal profession? All judicial candidates put their resumes on display because it is one of the few things they can use to differentiate themselves from their opponents. Now, you are also allowed in judicial campaigns to talk about your values, and in some ways this is where you get around talking about cases. You can tell voters about your notions of right and wrong, in what the law means to you, and how you will abide the law if given license to interpret the law. You can say things like, I don't believe judges should legislate from the bench. You can call yourself a constitutional conservative that telegraphs to voters some hint about how you would rule on controversial cases. Express your values in the course of a campaign, and it will give voters some hint of the kind of judge you are going to be. The final 2 elements of your message is during the course of the campaign, you're allowed to tell stories that put your values on display. You're allowed to talk about times in your life when maybe you stayed up all night, putting together a brief for a case, that won a court case for a party that had been served an injustice. You can talk about times in your legal experience where perhaps I had one judicial candidate do this once. She had been a prosecutor in a DA's office in New York. She had successfully prosecuted 7 gang members in a courtroom. It was one of her credentials. It was an expression of her values. She used that story in a political campaign to demonstrate her intolerance of drugs and people who peddle drugs, and that sent a message to the voters who heard it. The other element of your campaign message that you are allowed to use is direct comparison between you. Whereas, what makes you a better choice than the candidate you are running against? What about your background and your moral code makes you a better potential judge than your opponent? What have you done that your opponent has not? That kind of comparative advertising is fair game in a judicial race. Just make sure you tell the truth about your opponent. The final component of your campaign strategy is how you plan to disseminate that information to voters. In other words, what kind of advertising are you going to do? Now, I have been involved in dozens of judicial races, and I can tell you this is commonly what goes on. Judicial candidates use localized TV, they use cable TV, They use what we call over-the-top TV. They use what we call connected TV. Judicial candidates use mail. Judicial candidates use radio in areas where there is a dominant radio station. Judicial candidates do Facebook and Instagram advertising and digital advertising. All of those are fair game in a judicial race. Now you got to take a look at it, decide the most efficient advertising medium to use, put your money in a place where you can disseminate the greatest number of ads to people for the least amount of money. That is the final piece of developing your campaign strategy. So we talked about the targeting, we talked about your message, we talked about how you disseminate that message. Now, I have a gift for you. If you plan to run for office someday, judicial or otherwise, the gift is in the link below this video. How to run for office, 7 essential steps. Go there now while this is fresh in your mind, grab a pen, take some notes, and watch it.